So the basic requirements, the first thing is that you have to be a citizen of a country with an E2 treaty. And the Immigration and Nationality Act requires a treaty between your country that you're a citizen of and the United States in order to apply for the E2. And as of December last year, Portugal is now an E2 treaty country. Interestingly, though, they haven't updated the Department of State website to include Portugal, and they haven't updated the DOS manual, which sort of governs how consular officers review and analyze and approve cases, to include Portugal either. I looked that up this morning. But many countries have it. I believe there's over 70 countries that have those treaties. Some of the countries that do not have those treaties, which have a lot of individuals, are Russia, India, China, Brazil. Those countries do not have a treaty at this time for an E2. And one of the new wrinkles in E2 is this star that I have, which has to do with acquiring nationality through a financial investment. Congress and President Joe Biden just passed a new law that says, well, hey, if you got your nationality and citizenship through that financial investment, you must be domiciled in that country for no less than 3 years before using that passport to apply for the E2 visa. That just happened last month, and there has been no real guidance from the Department of State on that. So we just
imagine, Joey, it's going to be kind of like case by case, like depending like their circumstance, and if it was through real estate or donation, like kind of what's the best strategy forward if they're going to do the E2 visa.
Right. But I will say, you and I had a client, is a Nigerian national who did obtain Grenada citizenship through financial investment. We applied in Lagos, Nigeria, and he got his E2 visas issued this month after this new law went into effect, without having continuous period of 3 years living in Grenada. So it hasn't been implemented yet. We don't know when it will be, but I imagine there will be notices and in the Foreign Affairs manual.
And his business is already open in a Walmart in Texas. So we look forward to seeing the growth of his E2 business.
Exactly. So, when they say, you have to invest, the big question is, well, what you have to have a substantial investment. That is a relatively vague term. It depends on the type of business that you are going to be operating, what substantial means. My general rule of thumb is I want to see a minimum of 100 or 150K investment into this US business. And ideally, I want to see that a good amount of that has already been spent, because you can argue then that it is irrevocably committed capital and that it is part of a real and operating enterprise. Patrick, when you're looking at the franchise opportunities, what are you generally seeing in terms of this issue and the amount of the investment?
Depends on your risk tolerance. Hey, if you want to try to apply for 80K and you know that it's going to increase your chances of denial and you're totally okay with that, all right. But I don't prefer that. I'd like you to invest 150K. So whatever you need to do to get up there, whether it's prepaying your Google ad spend, Facebook ad spend, your trips to the United States, your company car, the franchise fee, everything to get to ideally 150K or more, but definitely 100K, you should do it, especially if you're married and you have kids and you have a decent net worth. Don't play games with this, because we've seen it where people don't follow advice of their immigration attorney. They don't sign the lease. They don't commit the funds. They get denied. They reapply. It takes another 9 months. The kid's school year is all screwed up. And it was to what? Save 30K and you're worth 2 million. So it's going to depend on your income as well as your net worth. But if you have a substantial net worth, if you have proper income, you shouldn't play games with the amount, and it needs to be as complete as possible. And the government doesn't say, the consulate don't say, but 100K, 150K, it starts checking the box of some items. That's what I've seen.
One thing that I'm asked about a lot by potential E2 investors is, well, hey, can we put the funds in escrow? and have the funds be released upon issuance of the visa? The answer is yes, you can, and that is allowed in the Foreign Affairs Manual, but it heightens the risk.
I would agree with that. And we spoke, I had an Egyptian denial and a Pakistani denial where it was just everything in escrow. And the consulate officer saying no knew that this guy was going to get all the funds back. And neither of them reapplied. The reason was intent not to go home to Egypt, go home to Pakistan. I don't know if there was something else there, but that was the reason of denial. They got the funds back. They didn't move to the US. We kind of all wasted our time. I would have loved them to try to reapply and try to redo the business plan and also show that they had businesses in their home country, homes in their home country, that they had really serious connections there. But they got the money back and that was it.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I like to see irrevocable investment, and you show that it's committed by spending the money. And you have to demonstrate that it's a real and operational enterprise. And so I like to see employees on payroll, revenue coming in, maybe some business contracts already established so that you can provide those to the consular officer and say, hey, look, this business is set up and we already have employees. I'm coming over to help direct and develop it and to grow the company, but we've already spent the money and it's already operational. Those are the types of cases that I think are the strongest when you're going in front of a consulate officer. You mentioned business plan earlier, and that to me gets to the issue of marginality, because an E2 enterprise cannot be marginal. And again, that is also a relatively vague term, but what they say about marginality is that it has to have the present or future capacity to support more than just the investor and his immediate family. And so I will not file a new E2 business case without a business plan included that has a financial pro forma for the next 5 years and some projections about revenue, about total income, about number of employees, so that you can make the argument that with it, by the end of the next 5 years, even if it's marginal at this current time, maybe it's operating in a loss for the first 6 months or 12 months, but by the end of that 5-year period, hey, we're in a good position, and you have the backup of a business plan that you can point the consular officer to.
The business plan can make or break a case. We don't do business plans. You have your network of professionals, business plans writers that connect with the franchisors to understand what franchisees in the past have done over a 5-year period to paint that story of revenue, employee count, contractor count, and all that. But I don't think we've had, hundreds of cases over the years. I don't think we've ever had a case where they didn't have a business plan, even when they were acquiring an existing franchise, a franchise resell. It seems like it's like a low enough expense to pay for the business plan, and that's included as part of the substantial investment requirements. So
exactly. And I think it provides some credibility
to
the consular officer that, hey, this isn't just something that I'm throwing money at and I haven't thought through. We've really spent some time and thought about the financial performance of this business. And I think that goes to show a more serious intent to, hey, that I really am directing and developing this new enterprise. And that gets to the last basic requirement here, which is that the investor must direct and develop the enterprise. And this is something that I wanted to talk to you about, Patrick, and sort of the use of a day-to-day manager to maybe oversee the operations. Maybe like, let's say you're running a food franchise, for example. You don't necessarily want to be behind the counter directing and developing the employees there.
Definitely. And it's like also not credible. Like we've had 3 billionaire clients that did the E2 visa because they didn't want a green card. And if they were the one providing the end service, like it's just a joke. The consul officer can Google and see that they're on Forbes.
Right.
So they have a manager doing all that. And it's part of a holding company that might be the E2 visa business that's doing investments. And we have a nice anchor franchise as part of that E2 Visa holding company, but there's a lot of activities that chairman executive's doing. And there's that anchor franchise, but they're also doing real estate investments, investing in other operating businesses, M&A, you name it. Like, it needs to make sense. And what you put forward based on their background is what they're actually going to be doing. And
Right.
that the consulate officer thinks they're going to be doing that based on what their experience has been.
Really good point, in particular for those who may not have the skills or experience in running a business. That won't necessarily stop you from applying for an E2 to do a new business in the United States, but certainly it's something that a consulate officer is going to be looking at. You spent the last 2 decades working in the real estate business. You manage commercial properties. Okay, now you're going and you want to open up let's just say a home healthcare franchise. Pretty much 2 completely different industries. There are skills that you have learned and acquired that can be used in any industry as a commercial real estate operator. But there are sometimes, I think in particular for maybe like younger applicants or those who, are still maybe just students or things like that, they may have a little bit more critical eye. Have you had any experience with that where they've looked
We've had
at
the gamut. I mean, 70% of our clients are high net worth. So say 2 mil plus, and they're making at least 300K a year. It's a very different profile than someone that's going to be rolling up their sleeves, investing 100K, trying to do as little as possible. They're going to have to put in the work. So they're going to be doing a lot of things in the beginning and like scale up over time. But that investor that has already kind of made it and maybe has business interests abroad, they're say investing 250K and the franchisor helps source that day-to-day manager. And they're more on the strategy side. How are they going to continue to expand? Key hiring, firing decisions, approving major expenses over 5K. It's what a CEO does. And there's that first small business, but ideally they're expanding beyond that. And the business plan writer together with you, Joey, and your team is building that case of what they're going to do in the United States over the next 5 years. And it doesn't, the franchise can be the anchor and kind of the base of that business plan, but it's like, what else are the other activities that they're looking to explore, looking to do? So you really have to understand who's the owner of that franchise system, how have they behaved in the past, especially in bad times. And depending on their experience and their track record, and you vet that talking to actual franchisees, you can make an educated decision and partner up with a franchise brand where the owners and executives have done the right thing time after time again.